Hi everyone, and welcome to This Thinking. If you've been following along, I'm sure you'll know why we picked that tune to bring us in. He looked so quiet, but my oh my, we'll get to that guy from Florida later on. But I just wanted to tee up the evening by saying we're going to try and make sense of the US midterm elections. And I should introduce myself. I'm David Taylor, one of the editors at Tortoise, and as our boss, James Harding, likes to say, I'm also a recovering Washington correspondent. And I hope, that you'll be as gripped as I am by really digging into the crucial counties and the outstanding results. But we'll get to some big picture stuff as well. Now, when we first put this in the calendar, I think the questions on our mind were some absolutely vast ones. Is this a battle for the soul of America? Thinking of January the 6th, we wanted to know, will this be a moment where the Republicans win back control of the House and the Senate, or will there be a price to pay for all of that insurrection? And then I guess, on so many people's minds, what will be the impact of that Supreme Court decision on abortion rights? And will that be a driver to galvanize Democratic voters? So we'll try and answer all of those questions and work out, quite apart from anything else, where things stand in the race, because as you probably know, we're not all squared away on either the House or the Senate yet. And no doubt we're going to find some time to look forward to 2024 and any lessons to be drawn from what we've seen in the last day or so. So we're joined, I'm really glad to say, from Washington, D.C. by David Smith, who's the bureau chief of The Guardian there. David, very nice to see you. And also in the US, our US reporter at Tortoise, Ella Hill, who's in Chicago. Hi, Ella. And then joining us from the capital city of one of the world's great unstable democracies, from London, we've got Wenwen Lindroth from Democrats Abroad. And hi there, nice to see you. And I'm also hoping Greg Swanson, your counterpart from Republicans Overseas, has joined us, but I can't quite tell if he's made it onto the line yet. If he hasn't, then no doubt we can live in hope that he's gonna zoom in. He's not here yet, but I've got no doubt he'll join us if he can. So David, let me just start with you, just to sort of set the table, if we could, because again, I mean, I think the Tortoise audience is sort of following quite closely, and so I think most people would know that history shows that the midterms are nearly always a very bad night for the president's party, aren't they? And so I suppose that's the historical context. I wonder if you could just give us a sense of that context and really what's the big picture? Where do we stand as we speak now on the House and the Senate?
That's right. I think elections are often so much about expectations. And on that measure, Democrats are delighted and Republicans are feeling pretty deflated. Especially in the last few weeks, there were so many narratives around polling and headlines suggesting a red wave, and really it did crash into Florida, where Republicans did very well, but got no further. And many of the sweeping gains Republicans expected just did not come to pass, for which I'm sure we'll talk later about. Is Donald Trump to blame, and what were the other factors? And so, we certainly expected by now to be able to say definitively, well, of course, Republicans have won the House of Representatives and maybe the Senate, but actually we're still really not able to assert much for sure. And yeah, as you say, it's a break from history where historically the party that controls the White House usually does very badly, and Joe Biden has actually performed much better than other Democrats like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama on that scale. So,
and it's
so right now,
it's worth saying Trump and Reagan. I think George W. Bush is the outlier in recent history, isn't he? As having had quite a good midterms in his first term in office.
And as everyone points out, even that was in the very exceptional circumstances of coming just after 9/11, when Bush's approval rating was very high. But yeah, really, Biden's is the best performance by an incumbent president since then. And so, as things stand, I mean, all of that said, the House is still looking like it will be a Republican majority. So I think it's important to keep things in proportion here. Yes, it's disappointing for the Republicans, but they are very probably still going to control the House, and that means a lot in terms of Biden's agenda and divided government and so on. Right now, the actual confirmed results: Republicans have 209 seats, Democrats have 186. And I'm seeing a lot of projections that Republicans will maybe end up with a lead of about 7 seats, possibly. But it could be less. There's even an outside chance that Republicans won't win a majority at all. But it would appear right now they'll have a slender.
They might limp over the line, and I suppose that, I mean, this is in the weeds a little bit, but I guess, you know, they're a fractious group, aren't they? A fractious caucus, and just controlling them and having discipline is going to be a challenge for whoever the speaker is, and that in itself. You know, everyone imagines it would be Kevin McCarthy, but you know, there could be a battle over that between factions within the party, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's analogous to a British political party having a very narrow margin majority in Parliament. It's a tremendous headache because every member fancies themselves as the king or the president, able to call the shots. So you know, it may be less a speaker's gavel than a poison chalice for Kevin McCarthy if he does inherit that. He will have Make America Great Again MAGA extremists like Marjorie Taylor Greene making all sorts of demands, and he won't be able to turn them down on some issues, or he might have to do deals with Democrats instead. So it's an unenviable position. Meanwhile, in the Senate, effectively at the moment, Republicans lead 49 to 48. There are, of course, 100 seats in total. So all eyes on Arizona, where last I looked, about 70% of the vote was in, Nevada, and then, of course, Georgia. And if Arizona and Nevada go the way that we think they might, then yet again, just like last year, control of the entire Senate might depend on a runoff in Georgia. Raphael Warnock won that in January 2021, a day before the January 6th insurrection. This time it'll be on December the 6th, a runoff this time against Herschel Walker, one of the many flawed Trump-endorsed candidates, a former American football star who's been in various controversies. Yeah, we'll have to see how that pans out. So, certainly some people today asking Donald Trump to delay his presidential announcement until the Georgia race is out of the way.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's possible, I suppose, that in the next couple of days that both Nevada and Arizona will end up in the Democratic column, and then Georgia doesn't matter quite so much, does it? And just while we're about here, just give us a sense of, you know, what people should understand about what it does to a presidency when you lose control of one side or other of Congress.
It's going to be a difficult time for Joe Biden. It will certainly stall and make it very difficult for him to pass his legislative agenda, and because, you know, a Republican House or Republican Senate or both can simply say no and block some of those measures. And a prime example of this was the Barack Obama presidency, where he got a lot done in his first 2 years, but then did suffer what he called a shellacking in 2010. Yes. And from then on in, for 6 years, we saw something more like grinding partisan warfare. He had a Republican Congress obstructing and blocking at every turn. So we can potentially expect something similar. And this time, of course, it's turbocharged. We're in the era of Trump and MAGA extremism.
Yeah.
So we can expect not only Washington gridlock and wrestling over legislation, and of course, Republicans incentivized to deny Joe Biden some more bipartisan wins. He got some in his first couple of years. Now they're incentivized to stop that because of the 2024 presidential election looming to view. But in addition to that, once Republicans have control, say, of the House, then we can expect them to not only wind down the January 6th committee, but actually launch myriad investigations of their own. Some might be regarded as legitimate, such as Biden's botched withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan, but some maybe less sensible, such as into Hunter Biden, the president's son, and his laptop and his foreign business dealings and so on. So although a lot of Democrats are breathing a sigh of relief after this election, I don't think it's an end to America's dysfunction anytime soon.
Yeah. So I suppose, in short, potential for gridlock and potential for, in the same way that the January 6th congressional hearings have caused unending strife for Republicans, it's you're going to get some of that flowing the other way, I suppose, when the Oversight Committee in the House is chaired by a Republican in the next coming months. Well, look, let me thank you for that, for setting us up. And obviously, if I'm sure you've got half an eye on on TweetDeck or something like that, but if one of those results gets called while we're in, then do give us a shout. I'm going to come, if I could, to Wenwen Lindroth from Democrats Abroad, and I suppose one thing I could say when just at the outset is, at least no one's laughing at your elections.
Oh, that's kind. I'd say it's a difficult moment around the world, given populism everywhere. So we are not laughing, but we are cheered by the results. And
well, tell me
so far.
Tell me what went well for Democrats on election night.
Sure. Well, I guess what I would say is that the results so far, in my mind, and just to clarify, the opinions I express here are my own, not those of my employer. So what went well in my mind is that the results, frankly, defied history. Mm-hmm. We were up against some pretty hard headwinds. The first one being just historical, precedents, and on average 26 seats change hands in the midterms after a party comes to power in the White House, and so far it's only 8 that have flipped to the Republicans, so far short of the historical average. That's the first. The second, the economy has been suffering from supply side disruptions. There's very high inflation. That is unquestionably a challenge. And the fact that Democrats have performed as well as they have on November, on Tuesday, is, in my mind, an affirmation of our platform, our policies, and also our appeal as the party with better, just, offering a better vision and better policies. And then thirdly, the third headwind in my mind is media slant. What I have found increasingly over the last several years is a narrative or narratives that are anti-democratic party that somehow find their way into the media. And so, in the last couple of months before the election, there was a lot of focus and pressure, I would say, to try to turn a narrative, against the Democrats. And this popped up in the polling as well, which I thought was quite misleading. And so that's the third headwind that I think that Democrats managed to overcome on Tuesday.
And do you feel that, polling, you almost want to put your head in your hands, don't you? As an industry, it's been had a series of devastating blows to its reputation. Did you feel that there might have been a corrective this time? You know, this sort of shy Republican phenomenon. Had they, in anticipating and predicting a red wave, do you think they had they'd sort of overcorrected?
So I think there might have been, a couple of trends here. One of them is possibly trying to correct for perceived, well, frankly, it was, overestimation of Democratic margins in 2016 and to some extent in 2020. And so you can hear the pressure in, for example, Nate Silver's voice when he's talking about the accuracy of his polls, and he tends to get a bit defensive, when talking about them. So that's number one. So yes, overcompensating. But the other thing that I've noticed is that there's just been a plethora of what seem to be Republican leaning polls popping up. I'm not clear on exactly how polling is regulated or if it's regulated at all. But if the barriers to entry are pretty low and it gives Republicans some tailwind to get out there with poll after poll showing that they're ahead, I can imagine that that's something tempting for Republicans to do.
Okay, so you've talked about what went well. What went badly in this campaign, would you say?
Well, I would say that any, seat that we did not win is one that we wish we had won.
Florida, for instance, looks like a very red state now, doesn't it?
Florida looks quite red. Yes, that is true.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yes, Florida, Ohio, and certainly, some of the candidates that we, as a party, see a lot of potential in, the fact that Stacey Abrams conceded, and Beto did not win his race.
Yes.
Those are disappointments.
Mm-hmm. And I guess there's still a prevailing view that, whilst Democratic supporters might be forever grateful for Joe Biden being the Trump slayer, nevertheless, he still feels rather underwhelming to a lot of particularly younger progressives.
Right. I would say that one huge, phenomenon that came through in this election is the youth turnout. And, you could see just videos and videos of, students lining up, young people. Overall, studies are starting to come out now, but 27% of young voters between the age of 18 and 29 came out for these midterms. It was the second highest after the 2018 midterms. So, this long-awaited appearance of millennials and Gen Z is really coming through.
And that, well, one would assume that was as much to do with the impact of the Supreme Court decision as any sort of sudden passion for President Biden.
Well, I would say that for the young, abortion is definitely one of the top. And the other really important one is student debt. And the student debt forgiveness that, Biden put through on executive order, I think, showed that his commitment to that generation or those generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I should say, it would be at this point appropriate to have Greg's balancing voice from the Republicans, but I don't know quite whether he's otherwise disposed or what. But we haven't got any sign of him yet. But if he pops up, we'll get to him. But Ella, I wonder if I could come to you in Chicago. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. This is Ella, one of our reporters at Tortoise, and Ella, I kind of want to start thinking about Trump and his influence, and I know you've been doing a bit of research in that area, because again, one of the features of this election, I think, was that, as he's wont to do, Trump made lots and lots of picks of preferred candidates, didn't he? I wonder if you could just tell us what happened next.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think going back to what David said, there just wasn't that red wave that was expected, and consensus is that the Republican Party should have performed better than it did in this election. And I think that a lot of that is because Trump made the midterms so much about his 2020 election conspiracy theories, and that really did for him. And across the map, there were candidates with experience who were passed over in the primaries in favor of those who would be loyal to Trump and deny the election. And now we see him blaming absolutely everyone but himself for what happened. So, including Melania for persuading him to endorse Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania.
That might be the first recorded conversation between Melania and Donald Trump in 4 years, I think.
Yeah, and
your fault, he says.
And in terms of other election deniers in some of those really, really tight races, there were Trump-backed candidates in Michigan for governor, and a COVID conspiracy theorist in New Hampshire who was running for Senate, who lost those really tight races. And those races really could have been winnable for the Republicans if they had different candidates. I think that the extremism might have won them the primaries, but it turned voters off in a big way. Maybe not as much as you might hope, given that those races were still super, super tight. But
are there results you can point to, or states you can point to, where, for instance, a more mainstream candidate running in one part of the ticket of the Republicans won, whilst a more extreme election denier, Trumpian candidate lost? Were voters revealing themselves to be that sophisticated?
Yeah, so I think a good example of that, I think there was in a few sort of split ticket decisions in various places. I mean, you saw that in, for example, in Georgia, where, I mean, that's still super close and obviously hasn't been called yet, but people were going behind, sorry, excuse me, not Georgia, but people were going behind Republicans there, and Raphael Warnock, obviously the Republicans who were not Trumpian in that instance. But
so yes, you had a governor's race there where they won, and I think, whilst he's not out of it, Herschel Walker, he certainly didn't enjoy the same headwind that Kemp did in the governor's race.
Yeah, exactly. They were turned off by Walker in some instances, but going for Kemp precisely.
Okay, and I suppose thank you for that. And I suppose the reason to start talking about the Trump effect, David, I think if I could just get you to think about this, is because there is a potential moment here, isn't there, for well, it's a crossroads, I suppose, the Republican Party. Are they able to move on from Trump, and is this actually an opportunity for them? Because I think it's been said, hasn't it, that you saw a lot of sort of party officials kind of complaining that Trump had been a drag, Trump's name had been a drag on their prospects and their outcomes. So what do you think? I mean, what's the mood in the party about him?
I think Trump is possibly at his weakest moment in the Republican Party since the insurrection at the US Capitol on January the 6th last year. He was the big loser on Tuesday night. Just when you, as others have said here, when you look at particularly the candidates he endorsed, who were shaped in his own image, who were very Trumpian, with the exception of J.D. Vance in Ohio, there was some pretty devastating losses. And I think you've seen already reaction from some Republican Party leaders and elders saying, these were very winnable seats. It should have been a red wave. Really, Trump is an albatross around the party's neck. He dragged a lot of these candidates down, and many of these candidates were not only extremist but also very politically inexperienced. In very Trumpian fashion, celebrity was placed above political know-how, and they really paid a price for that. And obviously, with exquisitely bad timing for Trump, the biggest winner of the night was Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, re-elected in a landslide, 19 percentage points over Charlie Crist.
Let's talk about Ron DeSantis, because I think by common consent, he was the undeniable big winner of the night. And I'm sure that people are following along and know exactly what happened. But just to recap, as you say, he won in Florida in the governor's race, and a feature of his acceptance speech on the night was the crowd there chanting 2 more years instead of 4 more years, because clearly they want him to skip out of the governor's mansion early and run for president. And some of the stats that caught my eye were, he won Florida by 20 points. Trump in the last presidential only won it by 5, and I think I'm right in saying he had a majority of women voters, of Latino voters, of independents, of suburban voters, and that starts to look like a potentially winning coalition, doesn't it? And you must be sitting there as a grandee of the Republicans thinking, we just need to push past Trump and get to this guy. Now, I have also heard rather magnificently today, I heard him described as Trump without the crazy and also Trump without the charisma. Is it possible that he's both?
Yes, I think that is true. I think he probably is both. I mean, a couple of points there. One is that Republicans, conservatives right now dream of Florida. It's become this red bastion. Years ago, Dave, we were both covering Washington politics. Florida was the ultimate sort of swing state.
Yeah.
I think Barack Obama won it. It was the sort of classic battleground along with Ohio, and like Ohio, it's slipped away. And Ron DeSantis is credited in many ways for turning it into this Republican nirvana. And the question is, for them, why can't the rest of the country be like this? So if and when he runs for president, I think DeSantis will have 2 key arguments. One will be what I did in Florida, I can replicate across the rest of the country. And as you say, very importantly, that includes, for example, winning over Latino voters. And DeSantis pulled off an amazing result in Miami-Dade County. And then secondly, his argument will be...
Miami, right?
Indeed. Secondly, his argument will be, I am Donald Trump without the political baggage, without January the 6th, without all the investigations, even without some of the craziness and insults, even though DeSantis does plenty of those. And he'll say, I'm younger, I'm more dynamic, and so on. But even before this week, having looked into this potential Trump versus DeSantis battle, I do hear plenty of people say, hang on a minute, he's not tested nationally. In a primary like 2016, Trump would destroy him. And very importantly, that DeSantis, people say, as a guy, he's actually a bit weird and he's a bit charmless and he's lacking charisma and he didn't make much of a mark in the House. He's probably not the ideal person to be meeting voters in diners in Iowa and New Hampshire and being charming with it. And they will say, look, critics of Donald Trump will say, I despise Donald Trump and everything he stands for, but I have to admit the man has televisual charisma and he actually has some wit. He can actually be quite funny and self-deprecating. And I would admit myself, I've been to Trump rallies and I I find myself involuntarily laughing at something that Trump says.
Right.
And it remains to be seen whether Ron DeSantis can
You
deliver
know,
punchlines, deliver gags, make people laugh.
I was having flashbacks to covering the 2014 midterms, and the big story of that night really was the coalition that Chris Christie built in New Jersey, and he suddenly looked like the guy who could, you know, he was tons of charisma and a sort of feel for connecting with blue collar voters, and he hit all of those crucial demographics. And of course, you know, we know what happened to him with his with his brilliantly understandable corruption scandal over shutting the bridge into New York. You know, it was just that did for him. So it's a long way to polling day. I do wish it is a shame we don't have someone to speak up for and take us into the psyche of the Republican Party. But let's have the next best thing, and let's see what the Democrats think of DeSantis. I mean, is he an opponent who you would rather your candidate faced? What do you think, Wen?
Well, I guess maybe I'll circle back to the exact tenor of your question, but I think that first of all, having somebody run for the White House who does not foment mob rule and attacks on Capitol would be great as a start, as a baseline. Okay. So having established that, and I had a little time here to think about, you know, what's important to American people, and, you know, can DeSantis actually sort of embody or push policies that I think are really important? And I'm going to bring up, you know, the youth vote again here, but what's important to young voters? It's, you know, economic inclusion, economic fairness. You know, there was a little note in the chat about student loan forgiveness as, you know, perhaps being unfair. But I mean, given that, you know, tuition has inflation, and college tuition in the US has been something like 16% a year for many years now, it's just become unaffordable. So, you know, that whole notion of social mobility, it's really high on the list for young voters. And I think for the future of our country, we really need to address that. Some of the other issues that's, you know, close to the heart of young voters is the environment, gun control. And, you know, frankly, if there was better gun control, we'd have less crime. And then, you know, of course, reproductive freedom, just the right and freedom to be who you are. So, you know, issues of diversity and inclusion.
So it's right to say, as you go down that you know, long list of urgent issues, that there are plenty of talking points you can bring to support you know, diametrically opposed visions of a future in America. And so people have, there's no doubt, have clear choices to make. But I would like just to sort of just to get your gut response to, you know, who would you rather your candidate went up against? Would it be Trump or would it be DeSantis if that was the choice?
Well, I mean, I think that a Democratic candidate is going to have a good chance against either of them based on what I just said. And, you know, DeSantis has, he was, you know, a breakout star on Tuesday, but can what he did in Florida really translate into the, you know, to the Midwest? Has he ever managed an economy before that is a Rust Belt economy? Would he have any kind of appeal in New England? Could he win voters in the Pacific Northwest, which is a very different culture from Florida? How would he do in the Deep South with the Black voters of the Deep South? Would they go for Ron DeSantis? It's a really important voting bloc. So unclear to me whether, you know, his appeal and his vision could expand outside of Florida.
Yes, right. Thank you for that. Ella, I'm just going to come back to you. I'm guessing that you've watched a lot of Morning Joe and all of the other shows this morning. Someone in the chat is just asking the question: is politics in the US just showbiz now? I wonder. I mean, what's the mood in the TV coverage, and are they quickly pivoting to a lot of excitement about DeSantis because he's new?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the general tenor is that they're really feeling excited about DeSantis, really feeling like he's more of a credible candidate for 2024 than Trump. I think that, just reflecting on a couple of points there about whether DeSantis has the charisma versus Trump, I don't know whether the calculation is Trump would be a better candidate to go up against for a Democrat because he has this history of January the 6th, and he's all of this kind of crazy around him still, and that was the calculation that some Democrats were making during this election, was that we should go up against the most extreme candidates because we stand a better chance of winning. I don't know whether from that perspective DeSantis might be tougher to go up against. Again, he's not been tested nationally, as Wen said, so it's a really interesting calculation.
So David, what's the story that you most want to write this week? What are you fixating about? I think you might be muted, at least.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, I'm fixating on this very subject.
Are you? Good.
The 2024 presidential race. I mean, it's no great surprise, before the last vote is even counted in the midterms, everyone is already talking about what it means for the White House race in 2024. And
I mean, just before you go into that, that is worth just stopping to just sort of, by the way, shame on us all. It's pretty terrible, isn't it? Really, that long laundry list that when just had of urgent issues that are facing people's lives, the amount of coverage that goes in that direction versus the amount that sort of peers into the horse race. You have to sort of hold your hands up and say that sometimes journalists run after the wrong things, but I can't help.
Yeah, and you hear it from Democrats when they say you're trying to get their economic message through. Why is the media obsessed with the soap opera of Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema rather than what we've actually achieved for people or are trying to achieve? And perhaps yet again the media did not cover itself with glory in sort of predicting this Republican red wave. I think, and obviously Joe Biden faced questions immediately yesterday at his press conference, which I was at, about, so are you going to run in 2024? So always on to the next race in the perpetual campaign. I mean, I think three things worth noting. One is, step back for a moment, it's still astonishing that we can go through 6 or 7 years of Donald Trump chaos in the Republican Party, a 4-year presidency that rocked American democracy, shook alliances around the world, the January 6th insurrection, and yet still Republicans who have surrendered to that man are about to win power in the House of Representatives. So I think voters have short memories and are quite forgiving. I mean, the party should have been punished more severely. Secondly, DeSantis is a mini Trump in many ways, with his sparring with the media, his clashes with Disney, his attacks on transgender rights. So even if Donald Trump loses this Republican primary, Trumpism will still win. And we saw that in many of the midterm races as well. Whether Trump endorsed you or not, Trumpism is alive and well in the party, whether that's the governor of Idaho, whether it's the governor of Georgia. And
what do you understand that to mean, Trumpism?
I understand it to mean a Republican Party that has veered outside the Democratic mainstream, that is full of scores of election deniers, that is wading through culture war issues, obsessed with transgender rights in bathrooms in sports, is very hardline, sort of pro guns. In this campaign, used a lot of racist dog whistles, campaigning against Democrats on crime. Just the Trump nationalist populist streak, an obsession with border security. Fox News pumping out endless coverage of people crossing the US-Mexico border. I think Trump's legacy lives on, and that's why a lot of people are very scared of Ron DeSantis as perhaps an upgrade of Trump, a more ruthless, more efficient model who will actually win elections and get things done without the Trump chaos.
Yeah.
And for all of that, for all of those reasons, I think what's interesting is, if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee in 2024, then Joe Biden almost certainly will be on the Democratic side. For the party, it will just be seen as too much of a risk to run somebody new against Trump. There is no clamor for Kamala Harris to do it. Pete Buttigieg is too young. Bernie Sanders is too old. Joe Biden's already beaten Trump by 7 million votes. So if he can do it once, if he can do it again. But I think if Ron DeSantis is the Republican nominee, then that will be a fascinating dilemma for the Democrats. Do they stick with Biden again? Or do they say, oh my God, this guy, he's 44 years old, he's much younger, more dynamic, he would show Biden up in debates.
Yes, it'd be quite good if someone under the age of 80 was able to have
it may be time, yeah. So will Democrats go for a younger governor of their own, like Gavin Newsom in California or Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and 2024 might then spin off in a completely new direction?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'm just going to bring, I can see Nico McDonald's got his hand up. So why don't you jump in, Nico? What did you have in your mind?
I thank you. I worry I'm the only person who's not rooting for the Democratic Party in this discussion.
Please perform the role of Greg Swenson tonight.
I like Greg Swenson. He's an intelligent commentator. I'm probably the only person here who has actually campaigned in an American election for a Democratic candidate, as it happens for Bill Bradley, the senior senator in New Jersey in 1984. So I'm not exactly impartial, but I do find the discussion slightly, what should we say, partisan. I'm not a Trump supporter, but when Trump came to power in 2016, it was completely unexpected because nobody in mainstream US politics, not least the Democratic Party, understood that the ordinary everyday people, blue collar, middle class American people, were largely being ignored by the American establishment, not least the Democratic Party. And Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables summed it up perfectly. People who were not allowed to think certain things, whose very views made them outcasts essentially. And Trump recognized that and built on it. And he's a ghastly figure and not someone I've ever liked, since Spy magazine wrote about him as the short-fingered vulgarian in the 1980s, before most people had heard of him. But there's been a consistent pattern with Democrats, not least Biden, who in fact I wrote to get a job with in the 1980s, of just ignoring the issues which Trump has raised, even if he raises it very badly. And they're still doing it, to be honest. I think DeSantis's victory in Florida was remarkable because he was one of the main Democrats, main Republican governors who was against lockdown. Now, it's interesting that lockdown and the overreach of governors, particularly in places like California and New York, didn't play a big part in this election, but it probably did with DeSantis and his, there's been alluded to his hostility to trans people. He sponsored a bill which was against sexualizing minors in school. That's not anti-trans and it's not anti-gay. It's our children should not be taught about sex in schools. I agree with that. I've got 2 kids. I wouldn't want them to be taught about, any kind of sex well, certainly before the age of 7 or 8. So I think it's that caricature.
Don't you feel that is again, that's another dog whistle issue, though, isn't it?
I mean, dog whistle, David, is such a weasel term, to use another animal metaphor. Have out the argument. You can be against the sexualizing of children without being anti-gay or anti-trans. I was campaigning on gay rights before most of anybody on this discussion was, against Section 28 and for and so on. But I don't agree that young people, children essentially, should be sexualized. And I think that was the spirit. I don't think it was a dog whistle.
But I think the thing is, Andrew Goodwood is just noting in the chat there, teaching kids about sexual health isn't the same as sexualizing children, is it?
I don't think that's not the discussion in American classrooms, which is why Glenn Youngkin was successful in Virginia in the last round of elections, precisely because parents in Virginia were worried about what's being taught to their kids. And on the election denial, I should not take any more airtime. This is a democratic phenomenon, right? Hillary Clinton has never accepted, in any good grace, that she lost the 2016 election, not because she got fewer votes, but because the Electoral College America is not a democracy, it's a republic. The Electoral College meant that Donald Trump won. She's never accepted that, all right? Stacey Abrams.
I think she's extremely bitter about how it was covered, but
well, David, find me a statement where she says, I accept that Donald Trump is the legitimate president of the United States anytime between 2017 and 20.
I certainly don't remember her getting onto the ellipse and kind of leading people up to Capitol Hill.
No, look. What Trump has done
I think that really does feel like a bit of whataboutism that.
And my point is that the Democrats, if anyone started this, Clinton, Stacey Abrams in Georgia when she lost to Kemp in the gubernatorial elections in 2018, and Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House spokesperson, who's denied the legitimacy of both elections. So if we're going to go election denial, Trump is by far the worst. What he did was shocking and disgusting and anti-democratic on January the 6th. Arguably Al Gore started this in 2001.
Well, hang on a second. I mean, Al Gore went. Well, I could let Wen answer this. Al Gore went to the courts, not the streets, I think you'll find.
What I'm saying is some balance on election denial is appropriate. That's all I'm saying, David.
Yeah, well, I'd agree up to a point. When I'm going to bring you back in, there's a lot to pick over there.
Yeah, that was a lot. I mean, I think we need to start with the facts. And the fact is that after the 2016 election, that night, Hillary came, before people and she conceded. She conceded that Trump won the Electoral College, and that's just a fact. That's all I'll say. And, I really do think that people need to tell the truth and also not go out with false facts, gaslighting, and start distorting reality for the rest of the people, because that really is very destabilizing for countries. So it's not directed at you per se, but just saying, in general, it's just wrong and immoral to twist facts. When it comes to Trump and, the statements about populism and, the things that he said, they're more than vulgarisms. He has a history of breaking the law and of, fomenting racial, controversy, not just controversy, but he's broken the law. So when he was just focused on real estate in New York in the 1980s, he would not rent to Black people. And this was all documented, and, he came before the law because of that. Everybody also knows that, the 4 Black men who were falsely accused of raping a woman in Central Park, he made a big deal about it. He took out full-page ads. He had innocent people put into jail. And he did that based on the color of their skin. When Obama was president, he started the birther rumor. that I can, you know, that
you know
yeah.
what, should we not relitigate it all, because I think a lot of that feels like
okay, I'll just absolutely sure. I'll just
Um,
wrap up if that's okay, which
but-
is that, you know,
go.
after he was elected, we had, you know, the anti-Jewish marches in Charlotte, and you know, I would say that this is much more than just vulgarity and more than populism. So, yeah, I'll just end there, and thank you very much, actually, for playing the role of the Republican, because it's important to be able to discuss and debate.
And you know what, as if it was sent from somewhere on high, Greg Swenson is here. So Greg, if people missed the start of the call, Greg Swenson is Wenwen's counterpart for Republicans overseas. He's been I'm going to say he's been the #1 most popular Republican on tortoise events in recent years, and I can see that you're coming to us live and direct from the centre of a destabilised democracy on the streets of London, by the look of it.
Yeah. I'm so sorry about this.
Greg, don't worry.
Yeah. All right.
Let me. We don't have a ton of time, but I would really value a bit of speed sort of questioning with you.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd love you to just sort of tell us what you think went right and what went wrong in this election campaign for Republicans, and then I really would love to put you on the spot and say DeSantis or Trump. Who's your pick for 2024?
Yeah. All right. That's an easy one. I'll go in order. What went wrong is I just think that the Republicans didn't message what they were going to do, instead of just saying Biden's bad and the Democrats are bad and the country's in a horrible place, and all those things that are somewhat true, but without a real direction. And if you look in history, think about 1994 with the contract with America and Newt Gingrich. They really outlined what they were going to do. And in 2010, you had the Tea Party, which was a real movement. You know, it was a real, rebellion to some degree to the Obama, progressive left policies, but also it was a movement, and it was organized, not formally organized, but in a way it was kind of grassroots. Whereas this time it just kind of was, okay, the country's in a bad place, things are, inflation, the economy, the border, there's a humanitarian crisis in the border, there's crime in cities, everything was kind of negative. Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, I wish that the party had delivered a more positive message about what we're actually going to do about this. And that was the failure. And we missed some signals too. And when and I have talked a little bit in the media and in a forum, we underestimated the abortion issue. There's no doubt about that. Like, the polls were telling us otherwise, but I was looking at the polls and foolishly believed them. We also thought that, we were much too optimistic about the outcomes of the election. So, usually the polls favor Democrats, and then Republicans outperform. It was the opposite this time. They actually favored Republicans, and the Democrats clearly outperformed. There's no doubt about it.
We really need to wean ourselves off that whole industry, don't we? I mean, it's not helping.
Yes, I'm guilty as charged. I'm like obsessing on real core politics and 538 every day, and I shouldn't be. So I should have paid attention to the pulse. And I think Wen did a good job of paying attention to what the pulse was and what people were telling her, or conversations. So, and I also think that we underestimated the fact that the Democrats and the media did a great job of elevating Trump again to be an issue. Trump didn't help the cause, because he kind of made some foolish statements in the last week and made it about him again. Yes. I think there were some mistakes made for sure.
So do you, in that spirit, are you ready to do what Rupert Murdoch appears to have done in the last 24 hours and kiss him goodbye?
I will defend myself a little bit that I've been talking about how Ron DeSantis or Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley or Kristi Noem would be better for the party and for the country. I've been saying it for 6 months, but now I'm on the Kool-Aid. And the biggest loser in the election was Trump. The biggest winner was Ron DeSantis, but also, you know, Brian Kemp in Georgia and Abbott in Texas and Sununu in New Hampshire. It's really clear that you know, I'm stating the obvious, that the Trump endorsed candidates lost. Trump looks foolish. I think this might very well be or yesterday was the day of the beginning of the end of Trump and the beginning of Ron DeSantis as the leader of the party. There might be others, but I think this is clear. And if it's not going to be easy, I don't think Trump's going to go away quietly, but I think it's very clear from the outcomes of this election. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious, quite frankly, that Trump lost and Ron DeSantis is looking like a central casting candidate for 2024. He's definitely going to run. He has to run. You can't have this much political capital in our system and not run for president.
I suppose
so he will.
The lesson of Barack Obama is that you don't wait your turn.
No, and like I remember that those days after his speech in 2004, I think at the Democrat convention. I mean, he was just killing it, and he had to run, and nobody thought he could win because Hillary was the chosen one, and he just had to run at that time. If he didn't, it might have been too late, 8 years later. So, good for him. You have to do it when your political capital is high, and I think Ron DeSantis. I mean, look at his. He's 44 years old. I think Barack was 45 at the time. Give or take a year. It's the right time. JFK, Bill Clinton, Barack.
I can tell you're excited.
Mid-40s, and naval officer, Harvard and Yale. Yeah, of course. I'm on the Kool-Aid.
And no doubt a little bit relieved. So, okay, we've only got about a minute to go. I'm going to whiz round all of the guests, if I may. I'll start with you since we've got a good line with you, Greg. Just quick fire. Who are the two candidates for 2024?
Ron DeSantis and I'm going to go on a crazy flyer here, Gina Raimondo.
Right. We're all going to have to do some homework there, or at least I am.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. When? Same question. Who's going head to head in 2024? I'm afraid you're on mute.
Here I am.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Calling for time.
Yes, and I just want to apologize to Nico because I think I did hurt his feelings, and I apologize.
Looks like your friend.
So yeah. Thank you. Okay, so Ron DeSantis and Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, interesting. I like that matchup. Ella, can I come to you in Illinois? Who have you got for 2024?
I'm going DeSantis, and I don't know. I think we might have another go of Biden. Wow!
Sort of battle of the well, he's half his age almost. That'll be fascinating, won't it? Thank you for that. And David, let me come back to you in DC. Who are you going to put in your article for the weekend?
It's got to be Chris Christie versus Hillary Clinton. No doubt about it. No, I'm kidding. I think it's going to be Joe Biden versus Donald Trump again, and I think Biden will win again, and then finally, at long last, maybe that's the end of the Donald Trump story.
Wow. Do you have any? Is there any part of you that wonders whether there's going to be a Trump dynasty and we're going to get Don Jr. at any point soon?
Gosh, yeah, you sometimes go to Trump rallies and people are wearing T-shirts that say Don 2028 and Ivanka 2032 and all of that. I think it's pretty unlikely, even in this very weird universe we're in. I mean, who'd have thought Trump himself could ever get elected? But I assume there are slightly more professional people like DeSantis who would get the better of Don Jr. And I think, look at Trump has been a disaster the last 3 elections. I mean, in 2016, he lost the popular vote and fluked victory in the Electoral College. Since then, his record has been terrible. He was the first president since Herbert Hoover in the 1930s to lose re-election and the House and the Senate. This week, it went horribly wrong again. And I think, we constantly talk, will Trump's grip on the Republican Party weaken? Mm-hmm. Not even the January 6th insurrection was enough to really do that, but possibly losing elections is the one thing that makes politicians finally wake up and realize that they have to get out of this delusion. So,
and people take courage to move on from them, I suppose.
That's right.
Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much. We've run slightly over, but, that seems conversation appropriate for the midterms since we're still waiting for a few results to come in. We could stick around till December the 6th for Georgia, but maybe that isn't wise. But I really appreciate it. I'm very glad Greg joined us just before the buzzer. Wen, thank you again for your contributions. Lovely to talk to you guys in the States, and thanks for a very vibrant chat. It's been on fire there, and we'll do this again soon, I hope. All right, thanks guys, bye.